Well, it's not my favorite Rob, but I still like it better than Rob Schneider. Hello and welcome to Intoxicated Masculinity. If it's Wednesday with a cocktail video coming at you. Today we've decided to go with something kind of different, and it is a Rob Roy. A Rob Roy is a cocktail that was invented at the Waldorf Astoria in about 1894. A lot of cocktails where it's similar to another one, there's a bigger story behind it, and here this is just somebody who's making a takeoff on a Manhattan. They decided to use Scotch instead of bourbon, or rye, depending on how you prefer your Manhattans. But I thought to make it a little more interesting, sometimes we go with higher end stuff. In this case, I think we're going to go the opposite direction. So we're going to make this a competition between the famous grouse and Cutty Sark, otherwise known as what your grandfather smells like after 3 p.m. All right, now, before we actually make the cocktail, let's put these two incredibly high-end scotches to the test and see what they taste like on their own. Start off with our famous grouse here. These are blended scotches. What blended scotches means, it does have some single malt in there, but it can have neutral grain spirit. It can have a lot of other stuff in it. So it is not always entirely clear what percentage of single malt is in here. Yeah. Okay, start off with our famous grouse. I mean, it smells like Scotch. You are getting a little bit more of a like an acetone kind of flavor, or kind of a nose to it. It's not real strong though. I mean, you kind of expect to go in for a cheaper Scotch and it's going to taste real bad or have some, you know, terrible nose. This doesn't have a real bad nose or anything. It's a little sharper, not quite as complex, obviously, but not bad. Now we're on our Cutty Sark. One thing to notice, color-wise, the Cutty Sark seems to be a little more pale. Although with scotches, that doesn't necessarily mean anything. With scotches, you can always add colorant, and there's actually, like, you can add so much, and I'm not sure exactly what the requirements are. So the famous grouse could be the same color. They just added a little bit of caramel color to it. So. This is, there's a little bit more acetone, but very little of anything else. It's a real light nose. I mean, if I was to just smell this, you know, sight unseen, I would think it's a very, very young Scotch with just not a lot in the way of character. All right, let's see the famous grouse. The nose very much, or the palate very much like the nose. Tastes like a Scotch. Got all those nice Scotchy notes to it, but it is a little bit acetone. It's a little sharp. It's not real complex. This definitely isn't something I would sip, but we will definitely see whether or not it's something we can put in the cocktail or not. Let's try the Cutty Sark. There's nothing there. There's virtually nothing on the palate at all. There is the suggestion of a Scotch there. Yeah, as far as these two, I should say the price points on these two, the famous grouse is a little bit more, I think about $5 more a bottle. Spend the $5. I'm actually kind of surprised. I expected these to be very similar, and they are not. Yeah, with the Cutty Sark, again, on the nose, a little bit of acetone, and just a real light hint of you know, your malty goodness, or in this case, maybe not such goodness. And yeah, the palate. There are some very young scotches where you'll try them, and people will talk about the finish. This doesn't have a finish. It is gone a second after it leaves your tongue. There's very little, if anything, going on in this Scotch. It's kind of surprising, really. I've never tasted anything quite like that. We'll go one last time with our famous grouse. The famous grouse isn't great. It tastes young, not super complex, a little acetone, but not necessarily unpleasant. If you like scotches and you're at a bar where it's not a whiskey bar, you could probably sip that. Wouldn't be super happy about it, but I don't think you'd be super angry either. It tastes like a very young acetone scotch. So yeah, that's kind of interesting. I really expected these to be similar, and they are very much not. Anyway, now that we've tried these individually, let's go ahead and put them in our Rob Roy. And here we are with our ingredients. Now I've purposely put a whole bunch of stuff here on the counter. We're not necessarily going to use everything here, but I thought I would talk about the recipe that I'm going to use, and to do that we'll talk about the original recipe. So the first recipe that I have for this cocktail is in the Old Waldorf Astoria cocktail book, which is from 1935. We also have the Savoy cocktail book. I can't remember the year that was published, but I think it's around the same time. So both of those books, again, published around the same time, they have a very different recipe than is used primarily today. So it is a half and half of your Scotch and your Italian vermouth, which in this case is going to be a sweet vermouth. And then 2 dashes of, and this is where it also changes up a little bit, it could be Angostura bitters or orange bitters. Some recipes even call for Peychaud's bitters. I'm going to use the more modern recipe. So the more modern recipe we're going to do is we're going to start off with our Italian vermouth. We're going to get an ounce into each glass. You're then going to do 2 dashes of our Angostura bitters. Again, orange bitters is not out of place here, neither are Peychaud's bitters. The other thing, this is a more modern take, is to toss in 1/8 of an ounce of maraschino liqueur. So in this case, we're just going to toss in a bar spoon into both. It's just going to add a little bit of sweetness. And finally, our glass on the left, we're going to add 2 ounces of our famous grouse. I'm very spilly today, but that's okay. That's what bar mats are for. And in a glass on the left, we're going to add 2 ounces of our cutty sark. Alrighty. We're going to give our grouse a little bit of a turn. Now in this case, both of these glasses have already been chilled. So holding the glass isn't necessarily going to be a great signifier of whether or not it's chilled down. I'm just going to kind of use this more visually than anything else. I think that's probably okay. And we're going to go over to our cutty sark. It's the same thing. Just give it a good stir. Make sure it's, what you're doing here is we're adding dilution and we're adding chilling. Alrighty. Now all we need to do is get our coupe glasses. Get our coupe glasses. So let's go ahead and get our strainer. Strain that right on in. It's a nice simple cocktail. And again, if at home, if you either don't like sweetness or you don't have any maraschino liqueur, you can leave that out. I don't think it's going to kill anything. Again, that is a more recent addition to the cocktail. All right. And of course, no clone of a Manhattan would be complete without a maraschino cherry. And I'm interested to see what people think about the pronunciation. I have always heard maraschino. I've heard some people say maraschino. Whatever you want's fine. I don't judge. Unlike the comments section. All right, and there we have our Rob Roy's. Let's try them side by side. We're gonna do famous grouse first. It's really nice. Again, it goes to show you don't need a top-end spirit to make a good cocktail. This tastes very good. The bitters are coming out. It's got that kind of warm spiciness with the Angostura bitters. The sweet vermouth is chilling everything out nicely and giving it a sweet note. Plus the maraschino liqueur is also adding a sweetness. And it's sort of shearing off the harsh edges on that famous grouse. Yeah, it's real good. It's real good. Let's try our Cutty Sark. This is the problem with Cutty Sark. Spoiler alert, I probably wouldn't use the Cutty Sark in this drink. The problem is, sometimes spirits have a tendency to disappear in a cocktail. But this is a 2 ounces of your spirit, and then only 1 ounce of your sweet vermouth and dashes of bitters, and 1/8 of an ounce of your maraschino liqueur. Your spirit should be front and center. So for example, in our famous grouse, we're getting our scotch. You know, the scotch is again, like I said, the sharp edges are kind of filed off a little bit. But the scotch is still right there. The problem with our Cutty Sark and it being such a kind of not a strong flavor, that the whole cocktail is kind of falling apart a little bit. It's not bad because you got your sweet vermouth and your bitters flavor, and your angostura is bringing, or excuse me, your maraschino is bringing in the sweetness. So it's not a bad cocktail, but it definitely could be a better cocktail. And I would definitely go with Famous Grouse. Again, I would play around with this a little bit. If you think this comes out too sweet, cut out the maraschino. If you want a cocktail that's not quite as strong, you could go for a half and half. Do it, 1/2 your Scotch, 1/2 Carpano Antica, or I use Carpano Antica, but 1/2 of your sweet vermouth. And you might prefer that a little bit more too. So you can do a lot of things with it. Again, switch up your bitters, your peychaud's, your orange. All in all, this is definitely what I'd have. And this one, it just isn't holding up. Like I said, the Cutty Sark doesn't hold up to the other ingredients of the cocktail, which is kind of strange because we don't have real strong ingredients in there. So on that bombshell, I want to thank everybody for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a good drink.